Hi there, my name is Michael Harris. I'm host of Falling Up Radio. Welcome to our show today. We have a really outstanding show. First, I want to mention, depending upon where you're listening, you might be listening directly from the website or on Apple Podcasts or Stitcher or somewhere else. But if you go to fallingupradio.com, you'll be able to listen to this directly, watch the video, and you can also download a free copy of the number one book, Falling Down, Getting Up. This book was number one in stress recovery and yoga. So you can download a free ebook copy of that. And if you want the printed copy too, you can get that for free too. I just asked you to cover a little shipping and handling. With that being said, I'm super excited for our guest. I met our guest recently at a business event that we were both attending for a couple of days with a group of other people. And I was immediately drawn to her because of what she does and who she is. So our guest, Dr. Mary Clifton, is a MD, a family practitioner. She's been a researcher, she's a published researcher, she's published a number of books. I'm not really sure whether it's 3 or 4. We will talk to her and let her tell us that. And she's really focused a lot of her practice today on food-based, lifestyle, plant-based, CBD type work, and we're going to dive into all of that. So welcome, Dr. Mary. Welcome to Falling Up Radio.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for having me. What a great introduction.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I mentioned when we met recently, I was immediately drawn to you because of what you do, and it's something that's near and dear to my heart, and I know that the listeners enjoy listening too. I actually had a couple of comments lately where people said they want more like plant-based and food and lifestyle type episodes. So this is perfect timing that you're here.
Yeah. I love plant-based nutrition.
Yeah. Let me ask you, how did you become a doctor? What drove you to become a doctor initially?
Oh, well, yeah. I mean, I think of myself primarily as a scientist. Although I think being a doctor is so much more than being a scientist. But all throughout my childhood, I loved science, and I always, wrote a 15-page paper when a 3-page paper was necessary for, for various opportunities. Like my 8th grade paper on insulin was a massive paper on Sir Frederick Banting and all of his work in dog studies that led to the data on insulin and treating diabetic with insulin. It was pretty horrible before we had insulin. I mean, diabetes is still hard, but in any case, I've always loved science. And then when it came time to go to graduate school, my mother said, why don't you think about being a doctor of medicine? And so I applied to medical school and had a few great interviews and was lucky enough to be accepted at Michigan State. And so I've been practicing now for 22 years, but I've always been a scientist since I was little, I think.
Yeah.
And just really interested in how things work and why things work the way they do and how to change systems and create different outcomes,
Well, let me ask you about that, because in my research, I'm not a doctor, but I've studied a lot about various medicine and having my own health conditions, et cetera. And I find that oftentimes the researchers are years, if not a decade or so ahead of medicine that's being practiced. Do you find that to be true?
Oh, yeah, that's true. We have that problem all the time when we work with medical students. A lot of times the medical students are way ahead of us and, wanting to do things in a way that follows the research patterns, and the studies show over and over that people, not just doctors, but everybody, it takes 10 years to adopt a new habit. So, for example, using staples to close most surgical wounds reduces risk of infection. But it took surgeons, a solid decade to 15 years to pull the stapler out instead of the thread. And then by that time we had data on which closures could be closed, which ways to reduce infection. But it took an extremely long time, even in really, really high quality settings, you know, in top places around the country. Just takes a long time to adopt new ideas.
Yeah. Well,
So
I know even in the early 1900s, late 1800s, 1900s, where some of the doctors started talking about that they needed to wash their hands and that they could
right.
hard
Can you
for
believe
saying that because they didn't believe that that was true, that you could spread germs that way.
Yeah, yeah. And, you know, you think about Dr. Kellogg, a Michigan, you know, one of our famous Michigan doctors put his patients on 6 weeks of vegan diet before surgery. He had amazing surgery outcomes all the time, and even had a special little signature way that he closed his wounds, so you could tell it was a Dr. Kellogg procedure. But he had great outcomes, and you know, really surprising for his time. But now that we know everything we know, probably not all that surprising. He was just doing a really great ahead of his time work.
Yeah, and even today, I would imagine that the accelerated research and the accelerated knowledge that we're having today is far out in front of medical practice.
Oh, yeah, I think so. I think, but I'm grateful for the internet and for PubMed and for thought leaders in the community who can innovative ideas forward. I love innovation, and I love when a patient is empowered to take care of themselves and, you know, not be dependent on a doctor or a physical therapist, you know, when they can get their conditions under control and be able to avoid expensive pharmaceuticals. That's a very powerful thing to provide someone.
Yeah. Now, do you consider yourself in your early career as a doctor more of a traditional doctor, or have you always been more kind of an integrative, you know, let's look at these other ideas, whether it's food or CBD or what else?
Well, I think that regular Western medicine is very, very powerful, but there are a lot of things that we don't do very effectively. We don't manage like a cough, either acutely or chronically, very effectively. For example, there's a lot of things that we could do to limit the intensity of colds and flu that we really don't rely, that we just don't know about in Western medicine, that are very popular in other medicines. So, you know, in my grand rounds during my last year of my residency, I did it on herbal therapies, which everybody says has data, and it doesn't make sense to present it because there's not enough data to present. But actually, there's a pharmacopoeia that is available in Europe that has all kinds of data on herbal therapies. So I was able to find plenty of information on it, and put together a great presentation, which made me start thinking that a lot of times the information that you need is out there. It's just that you have to go looking for it.
Yeah,
there's a lot of powerful things in medicine.
Yeah, I find that.
And a lot of powerful things.
Even in the 80s, in 86, 87, where I had atherosclerosis and they did FemPops on both my legs. And for the listeners, a FemPop is essentially bypass surgery on the legs. I ended up at Pritikin Longevity Center in Santa Monica, and I know my doctors at the time in Portland at OHSU were doubtful that going to Pritikin would be of any benefit and that yoga would be of any benefit. And certainly in my early healing, those things, the diet change, walking, and yoga is really what helped me more than anything else.
Yeah, I mean, I think in a lot of cases that's true. We certainly have great data out of Pritikin and very similar data with Dean Ornish's work, you know, where he can reverse the need for people to go to heart transplant and reverse atherosclerosis in shockingly short periods of time.
Weeks. Yeah.
Yeah, with diet and with lifestyle. Yeah, just that crazy, radical concept of eating a vegetable instead of a piece of meat.
I call it, because I am plant-based, so I call it eliminating the middleman, so to speak, or the middle animal, and just going right for what they eat, because they eat grass and they eat plants. That's primarily what they eat.
Yeah, I think that the only way that the message really fails is that, you know, we just can't get full on salads. And so, you know, you have a salad and then you're still hungry. And then 3 or 4 days into your salad program, you grab a burger, you know.
Yeah.
We need to really help people hear the message about beans and whole grains
Yeah.
and help them get, you know, full on vegan food. But and then there's everybody trying to confuse the message around healthy whole grains.
Sure.
So it's very complicated. And then when you start to look it up, there's so much money around food that Big Ag makes a lot of sticky websites. And so if you're reading about vegan, you're suddenly reading about how dangerous beans and whole grains are, and then pretty soon you're really boggled up and don't know what to do. So it's still an upward battle, I think, for people to find the right data on diet.
Well, I know when I dived into the China study and T. Colin Campbell in that book and the information that came out of that, I mean, it's fascinating to look at that large scale research that was done,
Mm-hmm.
you know, in that study.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. A lot of it, my favorite part about all of that, a lot of it is population based. And, you know, it isn't like we have ever taken, 20,000 people and fed half of them Twinkies as their main dietary source of calories and fed the other half a vegan
What's wrong
diet.
are you saying something's wrong with Twinkies?
I just think it's funny how everybody says, well, you don't have any randomized controlled data on that, as though that's the gold standard. But people would think you were completely nuts if you took a group of babies and fed them, you know, just nothing but garbage and then saw an outcome. Of course you would want to feed somebody healthy food to have a better outcome. So the same thing, is true. Whenever somebody throws a randomized lack of data, you go, no, well, now wait a minute. What kind of data are you actually looking for because are you sleeping? If you think that sleep matters, then, you know, we've never restricted the sleep of somebody for 10 or 20 years to see the outcomes. You know, we've never actually, where we've divided a population and proven that people need to sleep. It just appears that sleep is better when we look over populations. Or if you're, you know, eat enough water, or if you're trying to maintain good relationships. None of that data is based on randomized controlled trials. So, we have great data on diet. We just have a lot of people that are trying to, you know, throw a lot of questions into the data to make you feel uncertain about decisions, you know?
Yeah. I think they call that gaslighting, don't they?
Yeah, in a really negative way. But I hear so much around CBD and cannabis too, like you don't have any data on that. Well, we have a lot of small trials, and we have a drug that's 5,000 years old. We have data all the way back into ancient Chinese manuscripts where they were using these products for nausea and for pain management for 5,000 years. So if you were going to grow two heads on it, you probably would have seen someone with two heads by now.
Sometimes I feel like I have two heads, like,
yeah.
So let me ask you, Dr. Mary, at what point did you start to become interested in CBD and what that could do? I mean, is that something more in the last couple of years, or have you been studying that for a number of years?
Well, I've been studying nutrition for a long time and really looking at ways to innovate around helping people, you know, have more self-empowerment. And I've really enjoyed helping people in that space. And then just in the last couple of years, I've had a few close people die around me, my brother and a good girlfriend, both of cancer. And, you know, close enough to me that for the first time, I was the one sitting at the bedside doing the hospice. I always am running hospice because I'm an internist and I have somebody that is moving through a process of dying virtually all the time. And someone's always doing that in the hospital when I'm working hospital work. But this was people that I was sitting at the bedside. And I saw a huge difference person to person with how they were responding to the experience. with using cannabinoids and not using cannabinoids. So I started, researching it, thinking there's probably not any research because that's all we ever get told. And of course, there's a load of research. There's loads of research.
Yeah.
So so really loads of research that nobody knows about. So I started shooting video around it, and now I've compiled 100 videos that help people understand how to use it.
Now that's on one of your websites too, because I know that you have like a big library and some resources and a blog and a lot of really good in-depth information about CBD and various products of that sort that's helpful.
Yeah, I think it's a pretty comprehensive library, and the messages on the library come straight to me. So if you get on there and you are looking for something that isn't on there, then you can just message and I'll shoot it.
Oh, wow, that's great.
I did a presentation a few months ago, and one of the audience said, "What about athleticism? Oh, what about athletic performance and cannabinoids?" And I was like, I'll go shoot that video because I haven't studied that.
Yeah.
So we have actually a little bit of research around that, and I was able to talk to a doctor out in New York who is working on the anti-doping laws and changing the way that those laws read around cannabis.
Yeah. Yeah. So when you talk about CBD, you're not necessarily talking about sitting around and taking bong hits. You're talking about oftentimes CBD does not necessarily have THC in it, but it has other, I'm not sure what you call it, substances that cause the effect that you're trying to create. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. I mean, CBD and THC are the predominant cannabinoids found in cannabis, and you can get your CBD in a whole plant, in what they call full spectrum, where it came from a plant that produces primarily CBD, but there may be a tiny amount of other cannabinoids like THC in it, or all the other ones that are lesser known, CBN, CBG, CBC. But the CBD is really the workhorse of the plant, the thing that reduces muscle spasm and helps reduce anxiety and promote sleep, all those things. So the CBD either isolated, where they run it through a distillation and provide a very pure product, or the CBD in more of a full spectrum, where you get other things that are also in the plant, is not going to get you high. It doesn't have the psychoactive THC, so you don't high with it, but it gives you that calming effect and helps to reduce pain and anxiety. Yeah, and it's very safe. It's available in all 50 states.
Yeah. Many of our listeners, and including myself, I've been in recovery since the 80s as well. And so I've shied somewhat away from any substances that might re-trigger some of that. And at the same time, I mean, I had a friend that had pancreatic cancer about 6 years ago now. And he was in recovery, and he passed in 56 days. He didn't have time to do any surgery or any other interventions. And he was using a CBD product that would instantly help reduce the pain that he was experiencing. Right. And, the hospital allowed him to have it there at the hospital as well, here in Oregon.
That's wonderful.
That's true in all states, but it's true here.
No, we had a little problem in New York with my friend. Even though she had a medical card, we had some trouble with having the product in the hospital.
Yeah. Is that changing? Do you find that that's getting better, or is it still just kind of there?
Well, I hope it'll just sort of crawl along. I think it's going to be case by case, and that might be a hard thing to get, to get moving forward. I think that's just going to take time, but I think it's getting better. I mean, the more and more we have legalization legalization for medicinal use and legalization for recreational use, you know, the societal pressure, all of that is going to work to make it easier to use the products appropriately around death and dying, but also around anxiety and insomnia. I was surprised at that event we were at together when we started talking about it, how many people who were just ordinary people, you know, that were saying, you know, people that, and really conservative people that you would never expect.
Yeah.
And then they said, oh, you know, I've been using a CBD THC product every night to sleep for a year now, or, you know, I use that to help me with my arthritis pain. I was so surprised at the frequency of use and how many people are getting benefit from it. So I'm grateful to be able to share safety tolerance data for people who are using a product that works well.
Yeah. Now, I want to go back a little bit to where you were already a doctor, and on your website, it talks about you came to a point to where you had a diagnosis of pre-diabetes and high cholesterol.
Yeah.
And that was quite a challenge for you at the time.
Oh, yeah.
Talk a little bit about that to the listeners, maybe on a little personal level, on the struggles you had with that and what happened.
Yeah, I was really surprised by that, you know, because I've always lived a very healthy lifestyle. I exercise a lot, although I'd have to say, to be perfectly transparent, in the last couple of years, not much at all, because I've really been focusing on.
We have to get you into yoga, yoga, Dr. Mary.
Yeah, the last couple of weeks, I finally, re-energized and just really realized that an hour away from work is going to make me far more productive than just continuously working, and probably a lot happier. But but anyway, for up until the last couple of years, very, very at lots of exertional activity and what I thought was a pretty healthy diet. I ate, I've always kept my weight low, and I eat. I was eating at the time of that diagnosis a cherry. Like a Traverse City salad, they call it up north. It's like a chicken and crumbled blue cheese and cherries and a vinaigrette. It's tasty, but it almost all the calories from meat and cheese. And breakfast would either be an egg on toast or a small bowl of cereal with cow's milk. So again, almost all the calories from meat and dairy. And then dinner was, meat to vegetable. So in reality, probably 75 to 80% of my calories coming from meat. And then I was having an occasional kidney stone, but not anything that was, I was doing fine, really. Some arthritis coming in one shoulder and in my hands, but my mother has arthritis. So I just thought that was what happened. Mm-hmm. But when I got that diagnosis of cholesterol and pre-diabetes, I was so upset. I remember seeing my doctor in the doctor's lounge, and he just mentioned it. And I said, John, I'm sure that is someone else's blood. You've made a mistake. And he laughed and said, we don't make mistakes like that at my office, Mary. And so I said, well, you did in this case, But so I went back to my office and grabbed my own blood sugar monitor and gave myself a quick check. And sure enough, I was 114, just right in the middle of the day. Yeah. So that set me off on a lot of research to try to figure out what I was doing wrong, because I felt like I was doing everything right, Yeah. And then really, when you research it, the only conclusion you come to is that you have to go vegan. Yeah. And then once I got to that conclusion and made that modification, then everything corrected itself almost instantly. Yeah. It was amazing how quickly things got better. Not only that, but things that I didn't even realize were driving me up a tree a bit, like allergies and the little arthritis, the pain in my joints, just my general level of energy. Like all of a sudden you're younger again. So I felt really lucky to have gotten a chance to get better.
So at that time when you switched to this vegan, was it more of a vegan or was it more whole food, plant-based type diet?
No, it was pure vegan. It was pure vegan. Yeah, I did that for 8 years. I was very, very strict. I was never no oil, although I was low oil, but never no oil. I never tried gluten-free for any period of time. I cannot figure out how I would do that because I really need all of those grains. And I don't feel like, I feel like that would be, like that just wouldn't work for me.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I know when I switched, again, back in the 80s initially, you know, within 2 weeks I could walk 10 feet on a cane using a wall is about all that I could walk. And 2 weeks later, I was walking 2 miles.
It's amazing, isn't it?
So it happened so fast. And we had talked about Dr. Greger earlier, and I know his grandmother, when he was a child, she went to the same place, to the Pritikin Center, and within a couple of weeks, she was walking 10 miles, from a wheelchair to walking 10 miles from eating plants.
Yeah, it's amazing. It really is. I have so many wonderful success stories that way that I just feel so terrible sometimes. I was out for a long walk. I'm out here in San Diego just a couple of nights ago, and a fellow was sitting by the water enjoying his dinner. He had, you know, a white bread with meat and cheese sandwich, and between his legs he had a big container of fried pork, whatever, you know, those fried pork things, and he was enjoying, you know, the view. And I thought I just cannot imagine doing that to my body anymore after you know what I've learned and what I've experienced firsthand with diet changes. I just there's nothing that tastes that good for how bad it's going to make you feel. You know,
I agree, and I know that you created a cookbook called the Get Wasted, and that's not smoking pot wasted. Let me spell that for you. Listeners, is WAISTED. So your waste, right? So the Get Wasted cookbook. So is that like full of vegan and plant-based type recipes, or what's in there?
It's 100 dinners, because I was trying to find what the vegan community really needs, and because a lot of people are talking about cancer and heart disease, but a lot of people need a great weight loss program, and so Get Wasted was a really great vegan weight loss program, and within vegan food, I mean, it's pretty easy to eat a vegan breakfast, it's pretty easy to eat a vegan lunch, but people get stuck at dinner because nobody knows what to cook. So that's 100 vegan dinners.
Wow.
And there's all kinds of great choices for dinner, and that solves the problem of what you're going to have for dinner. Then we designed basically like breakfast, a big salad for lunch, and then rice and beans, some variation of a rice and bean dinner.
Yeah.
So that was how the diet, and that had varying levels of success. I mean, I think the problem is people get hungry on a vegan diet. They don't get full like you get full when you eat meat. And I think also people they worry about their protein. I think that's in there too. So and you get GI changes. I mean, there's a lot of gas when you add a high amount of fiber to your diet, and people don't talk about what happens when you're eating more plant-based, but you can feel pretty like things aren't digesting well for the first couple of weeks. And that's hard.
Is that more early on? Because I mean, I don't have that at all, and I get plenty of food. I don't feel hungry. I don't have excess gas, and I'm all plant-based. Yeah.
Well, the thing about vegan is that it starts to shift everything immediately. So and the cells that divide the quickest in your body are the cells that cover the surface of your body and your eyes and your skin, and also that cover the surface of your gut. So, you see changes almost instantly in the skin and in the brightness of the eyes. And then you'll also see changes, very instantly in the gut within 7 to 10 days. But I think before you turn over all the enzymes and shift the cells, people do get quite a bit of gut symptoms. So, and in some situations, if you're in an environment where you're working close to other people, that can be really difficult to handle,
But that's more just early on, what I'm hearing you say. Is that right?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. It doesn't go on forever. So you just have to be ready for the initial changes, and then, take it from there. Mm-hmm.
it took me a while to switch over, but I'm really glad I did. And in today's world, it's easier and easier to find plant-based meals and to be able to go to restaurants and they accommodate for you. I had to kind of laugh though. I was at the county fair the other day, the big county fair that we have here.
It's horrible to try to eat there.
Well, there was a couple of booths there that were fine, but there was also a couple of them, hamburgers, cheeseburgers, no vegetarian burgers. Several of them actually wrote that up on their big menu, or no vegetarian food, and I had to kind of chuckle.
Oh, that's so hard. No vegetarian food. No, I've been to restaurants before and I'll order the beans and rice and they'll say, we have a little pork in the beans and we mix the rice with a little lard. Like they're just intentionally making sure that they don't have to deal with a vegetarian in that restaurant. It's like, I got it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Hey, that's okay. I'll go somewhere else then, Yeah. Because it's like, for me, I feel, and I know a lot of vegan, whole food, plant-based diet don't want to put any meat products or dairy products in. It's a little bit like dumping sugar in your gas tank or something. Well, just a little sugar is okay. Well, no, it's not.
Yeah, you can be pretty restrictive on it and I never got to the point where if you cooked my veggie burger on the grill with the hamburger or with the same spatula, that I would get upset about that. But I know vegetarians and vegans who do, I think you're cooking off and most of and I think at that level, the risk is very low that you're going to get any kind of animal product that's going to, cause any problems. And to some degree, I just want it to be easier. I don't want to make my hosts feel uncomfortable if I'm there for a party. A lot of times just bringing your own food or eating before the event so that you don't have to make them worried that you're not getting that they're not going to have the right food for you. All of those things. And I just, I feel like now everybody's got it. And so most of the places I go or most of the experiences I have, I can find something delicious easily that's going to cover my needs. It's so nice now, even compared to 10 years ago when I first started on that whole adventure. It seemed really difficult, but it may have just been my own brain making it very difficult, and not really seeing nutrition where there was a whole bunch of nutrition,
Yeah.
So it takes time to open up your own brain to new ideas. It probably took me, I think, 2 years. And the studies do say that like 6 weeks starts a habit, but you really don't ingrain a habit until 2 years. And I would say that was definitely true of my diet. I felt a lot of times like I was eating, somebody else's food and my food, like the barbecued ribs and the, blue cheese dressing on my salad was all over there. Somebody else was eating my food and I was eating this food belonged to somebody else. But it took a long time until, eating that stuff seemed really strange to me. It takes a while. At least it does for me. It's hard for my brain to switch gears.
Yeah. Well, let me ask you a question. And I don't know if this is, you've got this question before, but you've been a doctor for a couple decades now. And over that period of time, did you have an aha moment or a couple of aha moments that really jumped out at you, that really caused an impact in the way that you practice and what you do? Like, oh, aha, I need to start doing that.
I think that the day-to-day practice of Western medicine really wears a doctor down. I mean, you're trying to make a connection and take really loving care of the patients that are your patients. And then you're constantly fighting with insurance companies to get the medicines that they need. and you know, and dealing with reimbursement issues and making sure that, you know, the front desk is answering the phones in a pleasant way. There's a lot to running your own business, you know, as a primary care doctor. And then, you know, it does become a bit of a grind. It's a very, very taxing job. And I think that part wasn't really an aha moment, but it was like where I felt like I was just shuffling around, putting crutches under people's arms. I felt like they were coming in with a busted leg. They had, you know, they were 4 pounds overweight, they were hypertensive, they were diabetic, high cholesterol, gout, depression, and I was putting everybody on the same drugs. Everybody was on, you know, a variation of Prozac and Lipitor and hydrochlorothiazide and lisinopril, and you know, everybody. And then here's your crutch. Go out and do what you're doing. You know, and then the next year they'd come back 5 or 8 pounds heavier, and you know, possibly in between then having a cancer or a heart attack, and it just made me very frustrated that I didn't really have any tools to help anybody get better. I just had all of these crazy crutches, and I was really just a middleman for a bunch of pharmaceutical companies and for the insurance companies, which are not in the wellness business. All of those people are very much in the disease business.
Right.
And none of that is satisfying over time. None of that is satisfying over time for me, or I think any of the doctors that I love so much that are back in the community that I was working in. I was just there last winter, but it was like an in-out. I popped in to do a couple of meetings. In the wellness community is different than the disease community, so I didn't have any meetings with my old doctor friends, but I ran into a few of them at breakfast. And, you know, they were like, it's worse than it's ever been. You know, the interactions with the hospital are worse than it's ever been. The insurance is tightened up here and here. They were just like, it's so not fun to do this. And it's heartbreaking, really, the way it sort of wrenches you away from what you love, you know? So that period of time that I became increasingly frustrated with what I was trying to do lasted for, you know, 14 years, but really intensified over time. But then when I experienced when I experienced my own change in my health that led to my lifestyle change, that was a big moment. And then when I went through these deaths and saw the other issues, you know, that was another big moment. Yeah. Because I think one thing that the plant-based community really misses, and it's a very small one thing, but it's a big thing, is, you know, you're focusing on anti-inflammation. And all of the foods that you're eating are anti-inflammatory. The movement is anti-inflammatory. But all those people in that part of China where everybody's experiencing major longevity are using cannabinoids almost every day, you know? And they don't put that anywhere in the literature, but they have a very potent anti-inflammatory product that they're exposing themselves to. And I think the plant-based community should talk about that, you know, and make sure that plant-based people share that, you know, assuming that you're in a sober situation and it's not something that you can consider. But if you're not in that setting, you know, the addition of cannabinoids on a regular basis will just help to further promote that anti-inflammatory, anti-cancer, anti-anxiety setting that you're aiming for with your diet.
Yeah.
That's a big answer.
Yeah, but it sounds like all of that stuff that you were talking about, once you realize how much the lifestyle changes in the food would change things, that became maybe one of those aha moments.
Oh, yeah. I mean, when I got better myself and I had to sort of back myself into it, I had a really hard time imagining not getting enough protein because I was just like everybody in America. I was so protein focused and couldn't imagine how I was going to do without protein. And then I literally, Michael, had my computer open on my kitchen table for the better part of a year. And I would be cutting an avocado and thinking, well, there's no benefit to eating an avocado. It's just a big blob of fat. And then I would get on my computer and go, oh, holy moly, avocados are great for you. They're loaded with fiber. They're just, this is going to be a great thing for me to eat. And I did that over and over and over with everything.
Yeah.
And I had another night that I was cooking food, and I thought, I wish that I could make those pork roll-ups that I used to make the girls. I hadn't been in 2 years, but I used to make this Vietnamese street food pork roll-up that has a lot of brown sugar and a ton of ginger and garlic and a little fish sauce, and it's so good, but it's not vegan and we can't eat it. And so I was making whatever I was making, and then I was like, well, now wait a minute. I can just make it with pinto beans. Pinto beans are my go-to replacement for pork. So I didn't have to cook the pork for 3 or 4 hours. I threw the pinto beans in with all the other stuff and mashed some of them and left some of them whole. And then it was utterly delicious. It was so good. My same old recipe. And my older daughter, who was in medical school at the time, came around the corner and she said, you can't cook that. That's not vegan. We can't eat that. You can't cook that. And I was like, I'm making it with pinto beans. she
thought it was
just couldn't believe it.
Yeah.
I know. She was like, what are you doing? We're all vegan. And well, tonight we still are vegan because you can replace that fish sauce with a little salt and it's the same thing. Anyway, that was a great night when I was like, there's endless food here. There's just really endless food here.
Now, this is a whole nother rabbit hole that we probably don't have time to go down, but you mentioned the thing about protein and,
yeah,
isn't it really more about the amino acids and getting the proper amount and balance of amino acids versus the protein?
I think it's just more about the fiber and getting dark green leafy every single day. I don't think people should worry about their protein at all. I think you should stay up nights worrying about your fiber and whether or not you got dark green leafy every day. I mean, if I get to dinner time and I still haven't had a big salad that day, I'm really honed in on getting a big green leafy salad,
Yeah.
And sometimes you can get a little off. I mean, like if you don't get one before dinner and then you end up at a steakhouse, you can still work your way through a steakhouse, and the vegetables sometimes are amazing at a steakhouse. But it's hard to find those green leafies, sometimes at dinner time. So I really make a point to get those at breakfast or lunch. But if I've gotten that and I can count up, I can't eat a lot of food. I'm not a 2 calorie a day person, but if I can get my fiber counts to where I'm 20 or more, then I'm in great shape. Then I can relax. But that's, I think, where the real health is for your whole system.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
We're already getting close. I was just looking at my clock, and we're already getting close to the end. So I have a question for that. Maybe the listeners. Or for you to help the listeners, are there like 3 simple things that maybe a listener could do to maybe take a look at their lifestyle, or maybe it's eat more pinto beans instead of pork? Or, I mean, do you have 3 basic simple ideas that somebody could perhaps use today or in the next couple of days to maybe help them feel better?
Oh, I think one of my favorite tricks that I love to do all the time, and that is just, I think, an easy thing to add, that's not only easy but it's also delicious, is hibiscus tea. Getting a high amount of antioxidants will help protect you from aging and from the development of cancer. And so I make a pot of hibiscus tea probably every 30 hours, and I drink a pot of tea. I drink it all the time, but it has, it controls your blood pressure as good as lisinopril in studies. And it also has 15 times the antioxidants of green tea. So
Wow.
you don't have to drink a bitter green tea. You can drink hibiscus tea with some lemon, which is like drinking fruit punch or Kool-Aid. And it tastes so good, and it's so nourishing and hydrating for your body. So I just feel like I'm fighting cancer all day long with that one decision.
Yeah.
I think it's better than water.
Yeah.
It's like supercharged water that I drink all day.
Wow.
I love that decision for staying hydrated. And then, the other thing I like to do is get a little bit of exercise every day. If I can't do anything, Michael, I do what you told me to do. I do yoga. I can't necessarily get a run or do a spin class every day in New York. Things get busy. But I can always stop and do 20 minutes of yoga, and there's so much easy yoga online. I can just pop in, any one of the people on YouTube. I have a couple of people I love to follow, and then just do their class and
Yeah.
and then get back to work.
That's great. Well, and people in New York, especially in New York, I've been there a number of times. They walk a lot.
Oh, I know. Yeah.
Walk to the subway, walk here, walk there. So I mean, they get a lot of walking in just in everyday life.
On a light day, if I'm like, okay, I'll go get some dinner and I got to pick up some berries at the grocery store, I can do that right on my block. But as a prerequisite to using the grocery store on my block, you have to be crazy. I have had so many weird experiences in there that I just walk 3 blocks down to the whole foods, and then I have better selection anyway. But yeah, once I leave my apartment, I get 5,000 steps, because you're just like, oh wait, I got to go to the bank. Oh wait, and then all of a sudden you're getting a ton of exercise. Yeah, I get more exercise than I realize.
Well, about 2,000 steps is about a mile, so 5,000 steps is pretty good.
Yeah, it's not enough. I'd like to be closer to 10, but sometimes work really gets in the way, but I always lean on those studies that show that, a couch potato vegan is healthier than and has more cancer fighting chemicals in their blood than a protein based gym rat. So I can just eat really well on those days that I can't get movement in and still be pretty protected.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Well, this has been a fascinating conversation today. I've learned a lot. Learned a lot about CBD, which I know that you're working on some more stuff around that. I've learned a lot just about the food and just maybe eating more greens, and of course the hibiscus thing. I'm going to do that. I'm going to go get some hibiscus tea because I haven't had any for a while. I'll drink some occasional other tea, and I'm going to do that and start drinking some more tea and see how I feel.
I think you're going to feel fantastic. You're going to love it. You can start out with a hot tea, when you first brew it, and then later on you can have it over ice, and you're going to love it.
And for the listeners, what is the best website for them to find more information out about you and what you do? And is it the CBD site, or what site is best?
Yeah, the CBD and cannabisinfo.com is where all of my resources are around CBD and cannabis. We're going to relaunch Get Wasted at Christmas time. So if people are interested in that, we will relaunch that around around beginning of December and November, and be continuing to relaunch that through the months of January and February. But if you're interested in that launch, probably getting on the email list for CBD and cannabis info. That's where that's where we'll be launching it from. Linking it through there.
Perfect.
Yeah, but we'll have a lot of people have a lot of anxiety that triggers around diet and these diet changes. And so we're going to have some really beautiful vegan, products that we can use to make that transition a little easier, that have CBD and sort of meld all of that together.
On the podcast on Apple or Stitcher, again, you can go to our website, fallingupradio.com, and look for more information about Dr. Mary, and her websites will be listed there too. So if you didn't get it, just come to Falling Up Radio, and it's all listed there for you as well.
You're doing great work here, Michael. Really valuable work.
Thank you, Dr. Mary. Again, it was really great having you here, and maybe once you get into launching your next thing later this year and early next year, we can have you back talking more about that as well.
Well, that would be fun. I'd love that.
Yeah. So hold on till we get to the other side. And again, if you, for the listeners, if you want to download the Falling Down, Getting Up book, just go to the website and download that ebook for free. And have a wonderful day. Eat your veggies and have some hibiscus tea, and we'll talk to you soon.
Bye-bye.